Time to light it up.
Okay, welcome back to Box Office Maniacs, where we're actually going to do our Deadpool 2 review for you guys now. Because we were going to do it in the last review, but we got stuck on talking about movie theaters.
Super excited to go see this movie. You know, I went to go see the first one without very little knowledge of who Deadpool was. Obviously, I knew who he was from the comics, but I'd never really sat down and read a Deadpool comic, so I didn't know his origin, I didn't know his character. So watching the first film was entertaining to me because I got to know him, got to know his character, and it was fun. It was one of those movies, it was a superhero film that actually had comedy in it. And it was funny and super violent and had everything that I loved in it. And I came out of that thinking, man, that was outstanding. Can't wait for the second one. So now, finally, here we go. We got the second one.
And I was pretty much the same exact way as far as Deadpool is concerned. I mean, I knew who Deadpool was. I knew he was a Marvel character. I knew of him. And I had seen some of the comics, but I've never actually sat down and read one. You know, I never read an actual Deadpool comic. And I would have to say, going into this, not knowing anything, yeah, it really entertained me. I actually think it was more entertaining because I didn't know anything, actually, going to see the first one. And it was just fun. It was a lot of fun, and I liked the first film. And when they were making the second one, I was like, of course, I'm going to go see it because I liked the first one.
So I've always said this, too, on sequels, especially superhero sequels, is you go see the first one, you got to get the origin out of the way. It's always an origin story. Almost 99% of the time, a first film in the superhero franchise is always, the entire film basically deals with the origin story. And then when you get to the second movie, it's like, now you can have fun. Now you know the character. Now, you know, everything is free. You don't have to, bog it down with, okay, this is where he came from, this is what happened to him, this is why who he is. If you don't know that already, go see the first movie, because they probably won't repeat it, or they won't repeat it much in the second one.
Unless it's Batman. Or Spider-Man.
Superman. What I'm saying is, when you have a Deadpool 1 and you have Deadpool 2, it's not going to be the origin story unless they reboot Deadpool in like 3 years, and then there'll be another origin story. So it seems like the sequels are always more fun on a superhero film than the original, is what I'm saying.
I know what you're getting at. You're looking for the actual adventure of Deadpool, and that's what everybody's looking toward. That's what I was looking toward with this, is the actual adventure. I was even going to say, even like Star Trek in that. Even when they rebooted Star Trek, I mean, they kind of gave it a little bit of an origin of where Kirk came from and where Spock came from and all that. And then by the time the second one came out, and that's one thing I said about the second one, was it got away from all that, and it actually did a Star Trek adventure, and that's what I liked about it. So that's what I was expecting with Deadpool.
About Deadpool 1 of the characters I loved that came out of that movie was Colossus, because I've always loved the character of Colossus. I thought he was such a cool looking character in the comics, and they never really did anything with him in the movies, even in the X-Men movies. They didn't really do much with him. So for whatever reason, here we have the Deadpool film, and he's one of the main characters, which is, I think, great. And they brought him back for the second one here. And again, if I haven't said this, we're going to try to keep the spoilers down to minimum. I'm not going to give any big spoilers out, except for I will talk about, if you watch the trailers, I will talk about some of the stuff that's been on the trailer. So if you've seen the trailers, then what I'm talking about, you've already seen.
Exactly. Because that's what we do here.
So Deadpool 2 has Cable in it. Now, I know as much about Cable as I did Deadpool in the first film, which is nothing. I know the character, I know what he looks like, I've seen him in dozens of comics on the covers, I've never read any of those comics. I know him very well, but who he is, where he comes from, what he does, no idea, no clue.
Well, for one thing, I think it was at the end of the first film, they were basically like saying Cable will be in the second film. And from the very start, that's what they said, that Cable's going to be in this film. So for me as well, I know nothing about Cable. I know exactly what David had just said to a T. I mean, I know nothing about him. I've seen him in the comics, but I've never read like Deadpool. I never really read about anything with him or an actual comic of his. But I was actually excited about it. You know, I was like, yeah, okay, cool. They're expanding the whole Deadpool thing. And I would have to say the same thing about the X-Force as well. Know nothing about them. But obviously from the trailers, they kind of show it in the trailers, it's in the film.
The story here is actually pretty good. It's an interesting story because Cable, again, minor spoiler if you don't know who he is a time traveler, and he comes back to stop something, sort of like Terminator-like type of thing. The bad guy in this film was actually a little kid. Was he about 13, 14 years old, something?
But he's not actually necessarily the bad guy.
Well, he is and he isn't, which again, also I liked about the film. I think that was a really good thing that they did with him too. He's kind of a bad guy, but he's not kind of the bad guy. But then he ends up kind of being the bad guy. Same thing with Cable in here. And I think Deadpool was amazing in this film. He was just as good in this movie as he was in the first one. I thought it was just as funny as the first one. I thought the action in this one was fantastic. And I loved the soundtrack. I actually went out and bought the soundtrack in this. I think the soundtrack is actually better in this one than it was in the first one.
And I would have to agree with all of what you just said. I mean, the action is great. The special effects are great. The writing is great. Deadpool is great. Everything was great in this film. But the only thing I would say about the movie overall is I didn't find it better than the first film. I found it just as good as the first film, and I really liked the first film. So it's more of a continuation of what happened in the first film for me. And it's not really better, but I loved the first film, and so I love this one.
And I'll tell you something weird is several people I've talked to who did not like the first film really like this one. Several, like 4 or 5 people are like, oh, I didn't like the first one, but I really liked the second one a lot, which I found kind of weird. But yeah, I agree with that. I don't think it topped the first one, but it equaled it. It was a definite equal. It's not like, some of these Marvel films you go see, like The Winter Soldier, and you're like, oh my God, that was incredible. But it was just as fun. It was an equal, I think, to the first movie. The only thing about it is, and again, this is on the trailer that you see, you'll see that he's trying to create the X-Force. He's trying to create his own little superhero group. And that actually is one of the funniest sequences in the movie. I ain't going to give it away, obviously, but right after he gets his group together, they go do something, and I literally was laughing so hard, Vince, I was crying. I couldn't even see the screen. I was laughing so hard. I thought I was going to pass out.
I will say that, yeah, so was I. I thought it was hilarious. I will say this, though. The jokes, as far as being funny and all that, I mean, the jokes in here just come at you at full-on super speed. I mean, while you're laughing at one, there's like 10 that go by. So, it's that funny. I mean, there's that many references and that many jokes and that many, puns and whatnot. I mean, they just come at you really, really fast. And a lot of that has to do with Ryan Reynolds and Deadpool and the whole, the whole, what is that, the fourth wall and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, he didn't seem like he broke the fourth wall as many times in this one as he did in the first one. He did, obviously. And he'll look at the camera and say, okay, hit it, for the music cue or something like that, and then they'll start playing the music cue. Things like that. But one thing I was going to say about the X-Force was it was cool to bring in some new superheroes, but they still pretty much relied on Colossus as being the main guy here, and the new one was named Domino, and I thought the actress that played her was spectacular. I loved her. I loved her character. Even though she doesn't look like she does in the comics, they kind of changed her up quite a lot. I didn't really care because I liked her character so much. She was so cool. But the only minor complaint I have here is I would have liked to have seen more superheroes, because it seemed like the first one he kept saying, well, they didn't give him the budget. They didn't give him the money to put anybody big in this film. So, and again, it seems like they have like the smaller, minor superheroes in this film and nobody really big, you know?
Yeah, I know what you're getting at, but at the same time, you know, it has its own big characters. I mean, because you got Cable. Cable is played by Josh Brolin in this movie, who also played Thanos in the Avengers, and I thought he was a lot better in this than he was in the Avengers. I'm not saying he was terrible in the Avengers, because he was great for that movie. But in this movie, he's spectacular. I actually liked him a lot more in this, playing Cable.
Yeah, I loved the Cable's character. And again, it was nice to kind of find out who he was, even though they don't really go into his background. So you're watching this cool character, and by the end of the movie, you still don't know anything about the character. Very little. So probably he will get his own movie. I would have to guess they're going to do another franchise spinoff. And if they don't, he will definitely be in Deadpool 3. I can guarantee you that.
Oh, I'm sure he's going to come back. Oh, yeah.
The sequence with the X-Force was still one of the funniest things I think I've ever seen in a movie. I don't remember laughing that hard ever for anything. So I really enjoyed all that. And again, Lionel, I was going to call him Lionel Richie.
Hello.
Where did that come from? Lionel Richie as Deadpool.
All night long. All night. All night.
So Ryan, I keep calling him Lionel. Ryan Reynolds is hard to say. It's hard to say for me, all right?
Try Green Lantern.
Overall, Deadpool was so much fun, and I'm glad I got to go see it at the Alamo Draft House. And if you haven't watched our I can't talk today. I'm going to call it the Animal Draft House. It's the Animal Draft House with starring Lionel Richie.
You see Lionel Richie at the Animal Draft House.
So if you haven't watched the Alamo Draft House review, we did that before this one. That's where I went to go see this. A lot of fun going to see it there. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed this movie a lot. So I am giving it a 5 out of a big old chimichanga 5.
I was going to say, I've kind of forgotten what I gave the original Deadpool, but like I said, I really enjoyed this film as much as the first one. I'll give it a 5 out of 5. That's what I would have to agree with David. But I forgot what I gave the first film. It was a lot of fun. 5 out of 5. Great film. I had a good time with it. Had a lot of fun with it. And speaking of theaters, I didn't have a whole lot of distractions in this one, except for one. Some guy kept running up and back and down the aisle that was behind me. But other than that, I had a good time. And one last thing I will say to you parents out there, because speaking of the theater that we just reviewed, to you parents out there, this is a rated R film. Okay? It's not Marvel, it's not Avengers, it's not Iron Man, it's not Spider-Man. This is a rated R film. So if you take your children there, expect to hear a lot of cussing, a lot of sexual innuendo, and a whole lot of violence. So I'm just warning you guys now.
And don't forget, Vince, the most important thing is Lionel Richie.
Yeah, and expect to see Lionel Richie. Hello? All night long, all night, all night.